Hi and welcome back to David Pattinson's Accused Friends. I'm doing this video today from my hotel room in Minsk in Belarus, where I've come over to visit in order to understand what a country looks like that does not lock down from the coronavirus, as Britain's now going towards lockdown 2, having totally failed with lockdown 1. I wanted to come and see what it's like in a society where no lockdown exists at all. Now, in the British press, a lot of people talk about Sweden as the quote-unquote outlier, but they rarely talk about Belarus, which also did not lock down with the coronavirus. They kept their economy totally open, and they've carried on like a normal society. And so people are wondering back home that I've spoken to, well, what's it like in Belarus? I mean, what's going on there? And I didn't know till I got here. I've been here about 3 days now, and wanted to give you some insights as to what I've seen. I have not been here before. This is the furthest into Eastern Europe and behind the Iron Curtain that I've ever come. I had to fly to Warsaw in Poland and then on here to Belarus, but it was a pretty straightforward journey. Coming out of the airport and into the city of Minsk, there's some pretty heavy traffic. There's a lot of people out and about. The big story over here, as some of you know, is this kind of like a disputed election, and the current government that's been in power for 26 years, refusing to leave. They're disputing the election results, which I think were in August. And there's sort of protests every weekend, and a lot of cracking down by the government against the dissenters. And there's a lot of unhappiness about that here in Belarus, and that's what a lot of people are talking about, have been talking about to me. There's been very little discussion of the coronavirus at all. It's rare to see people wearing masks anywhere. You do see some masks. Elderly people are wearing them sometimes. A few young people, a few shops have them with their shop staff, but it's really rare. I'd say about 49 out of 50 people are not wearing masks. Which is totally different to Britain. I mean, you go down the high street in Britain, you go into a supermarket in Britain, there's all this compulsory mask nonsense. And of course, Britain's the country with all the virus problems. They're the ones talking about lockdown 2. They're the ones talking about fines for everyone. And yet here in Belarus, where there was no lockdown whatsoever, with the same coronavirus, there are none of these kind of problems. And so people have been out and about. There's no track and trace, there's no compulsory masks, there's no social distancing, there's no Save the NHS, there's no government ministers from the health department barking orders at everyone on television. Everything's pretty much as normal. There are very few people here in this hotel. It's a really nice one in the center of town. Because apparently tourists are concerned about the civil unrest and feel it's dangerous to be here. I haven't encountered any safety problems or security problems whatsoever. People have been telling me that there's risk with safety, but there's lots of people out on the roads and on the pavements. All the bars and restaurants have been open. I've been in and out of all of them. I've been into the shopping malls. I was in a sort of a flea market type place yesterday, packed with people, very, very close proximity. And you then switch on to watch the Manchester United game on Sky Sports, and Alex Ferguson's sort of got, the whole section of the stadium to himself, wearing a face mask. And, you just realize how insane it is, all this Britain's response to the lockdown, which is totally unlawful in my view. I was like the first person to call for the citizens' prosecution of the government. I think it's taken a lot of time for the British people to kind of catch up with, not only my position, there's other sort of opponents of the lockdown in Britain as well, but I can sense the tide changing now as we go into lockdown 2. Back during lockdown 1, people were sort of terrified of the virus. And back here in Belarus, interestingly, people had the opposite opinion to what I was thinking. I was thinking, well, if this virus is so dangerous, why do Belarus and why do Sweden stay open? And of course here they were saying, well, if all these countries in the world are locking down, why aren't we? And I was talking to a owner of a sort of a wine bar type place the other night, and he was saying that his whole wine bar shut down in April, and he said a lot of the bars around here did as well for the sort of the personal safety of the staff, and this was something decision the staff made themselves. He said a few stayed open, but sort of about 60 to 70% closed. They stayed closed through April, and then they decided to open back up again because there was demand for business, and they've been open ever since. And he was saying, look, you know, coronavirus is sort of the least of our problems right now. We're more worried about this this disputed election and trying to overthrow the government. And a lot of people do these weekend protests. A vast majority of people I've spoken to are part of the protests and against this the government's position on the disputed election. It seems like they lost a lot of credibility. It's a bit like Boris Johnson, you know, zero credibility. No one really has any respect for him anymore, and you know, there's unhappiness about it. I did meet a couple of people yesterday that were on the government side. They said, look, we've got really low unemployment here, things are pretty good, and it seems like a really nice place. I mean, everything is very, very neat and tidy. There is a lot of social unity. I feel that Britain does not have. Obviously, this has been kind of a closeted country for a long, long time, and started to open up to foreigners in the last sort of year or two with extending the visa, I believe, from sort of 5 days to sort of 30 days visa free. I'm only here for a few days, but it's my first time here, and it's been great to visit. Everyone is very, very polite. I'm not encouraging anyone else to visit here. I'm just telling you what my experience has been. You know, I was sitting in my home last week, and I was thinking, you know, I can either stay here in Britain under government tyranny, or I can go to Belarus in civil war. And a friend of mine said to me, David, like, this is a total no-brainer. And I said, you're right. So I booked my trip, just flew straight over. Everything's very, very inexpensive if you've got the pound. You know, even the weakening pound has a lot of purchasing power here, although probably for not much longer if Rishi has anything to do with things. I was listening to an on-air interview with a guy called James Delingpole the other day, who's a really good guy. He's been very vociferous in his opposition to the lockdown, and he was saying that he thought Boris Johnson's days were kind of coming to an end in Britain, would sort of happen towards the end of the year, which is sort of music to my ears. But of course, then he said, you know, Rishi was going to be the replacement. It's like the only person possibly be worse as Prime Minister than Boris Johnson is Rishi. He having almost unanimously bankrupted Great Britain through this lockdown, and you know, determined to push us over the edge financially. As I've said before, we should be having chancellors that at a bare minimum are maintaining our wealth, preferably increasing our wealth, not putting us into so much debt that we can never possibly repay. I also predicted we'd have a 2 trillion bill from this lockdown, and I think we're well on the way to going well beyond that. But it's interesting to see the media are starting to push back now against lockdown 2 when they were completely missing in action during lockdown 1. And you know, there's Parliament have decided, hey, we might actually do a vote on this. So a lot of interesting things going on in Britain, and I haven't been doing many of these videos lately because I've been working most of the time, and there's also been a bit of a lull during the summer. Everyone's sort of in this, you know, waiting for the furloughs to end. They're in a kind of a bubble of financial protection, thanks to you know, Rishi's funny money printed out of thin air with no GDP to back it up. But of course, as we get into September, which we're in now, and obviously going into October, where the furloughs are scheduled to end, although I think they'll be extended partially, and a lot more protests, lockdown 2, maybe be lockdown 3 and 4 coming up as well. I mean, this is the thing with civil liberties: when you violate them once and get away with it, what's to stop the government violating them on and on and on? And that was my big opposition to the lockdown in the first place. It totally violates a citizen's right to innocent until proven guilty, totally violates the citizen's right to privacy. And we are where we are. We're in really bad shape. It's terrible for young people. It's amazing the government ministers go out and blame young people for spreading the virus, and yet young people are bearing almost the entire financial cost. They'll spend decades and decades and decades having to work to repay all this debt that Risha's created for us or for them. Kind of a relatively young person, yet they get the blame for going out to try to socialize with their friends, even though the virus poses pretty much zero risks to them. So total insanity. Not any of these kind of problems in Belarus. Everyone's going out. I went out last night to a few bars, packed for people. Everyone's really friendly. People have been telling me that, when it comes to the virus, the citizens have been given the right to do whatever they think's best, and it's a pretty sad state of affairs when British citizens like me have to come to the former USSR to get some freedom. I mean, Belarus was part of the old Soviet Union up until 1991, and clearly have more freedom than Great Britain does today. So not a good state of affairs. I always want to try and be the bearer of good news, but seems like on these videos I'm conveying more bad than good. But I want to end on a little historical note, and for students of the JFK assassination like me, Minsk has an interesting involvement in that, because Lee Harvey Oswald spent 18 months here in 1960, and the Warren Commission during the Kennedy assassination investigation disclosed to the American people that Oswald had indeed spent time here, but what they did not disclose was it was the US government that sent him here. He was working for the CIA. They sent him here as part of a false defector program, with the hopes that the Soviets would try and entice him to be a double agent against the United States. The KGB saw the trap coming, put Oswald up in a really nice property just down the road where I visited. A beautiful place, overlooking the park and the lake and that sort of thing. And kept a really close eye on him. He was the only American in Minsk in the entire country of Belarus for the 18 months he was here. He was looked after really well, but the plan of him becoming a double agent was not successful. So he left and returned back to the United States to be framed by the CIA in the Kennedy assassination. It was Alan Dulles, it was James Angleton, and it was David Atlee Phillips that planned and executed the Kennedy assassination. Oswald, like he told the world, was just a patsy, but it was interesting to visit the exact spot where he lived and see how different it is compared to the way it was portrayed to the American people and to the world following the Kennedy assassination. But I didn't want this video to be about government criminality of yesteryear. I want it to be about government criminality of this year. Most specifically, the British government totally continuing to violate British civil liberties. I see that Simon Dolan is continuing with his appeal for his legal case against the government, and they're slow walking it as much as they can, but encourage everyone to support that. I've donated to it. I've encouraged loads of other people to donate to it, and we got to keep the pressure on as the British people if we're either gonna get our civil liberties back or we lose them forever. So thanks very much for watching this video. I hope it's been interesting. I will hopefully get back to Great Britain in one piece and can continuing talking about the lockdown in the coming days and weeks. So thanks very much. Please subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.